Hook, she thought running back to her apartment at midnight would mean safety. Instead it brought her face to face with a man who smelled like oil and baby powder and who threw his small son into her arms before he shoved her through a side gate and into the dark where 2 bullets and 1 broken promise were waiting. Stay with me, because what happens next is not just about danger and rescue, it's about 2 people who meet on the thin edge of fear and discover that the life they save together becomes the life they choose. Maya had learned the language of careful steps. After years of doing everything right, college loans, second shifts, quiet smiles in the elevator, she moved through the city like a person who held her breath until she reached the door. That night her bag tugged at her shoulder with the same tired weight as always. The laptop she used for freelance editing, a sweater that still smelled like the cafe where she worked, and a heart that was resolving to say no more to men who left crumbs of affection on purpose. She didn't know why she had walked faster. Maybe the subway delay, maybe the rain that had started like a whisper and became a drum. Maybe fate, which has a clumsy sense of timing. The shadow crossed her path at the stair landing, a man she thought was only a little too insistent, asking if she could help load a box into his van. She said no. He smiled anyway, a smile with nothing behind it. She tried to move past him and his hand was on her elbow, not hard, but precise. Her phone slipped from her pocket like it was being taken by wind. He bent and picked it up, then pocketed it. "You can't be out here alone," he said. The words were meant to be helpful, but they wrapped around her like silk and then tightened. Maya felt the air change in her lungs and reached for the stair railing. What she didn't expect was the sound of footsteps above, the creak of a door, a child's cough, and a man who wasn't part of the city's anonymous crowd. He appeared without theatrics, a tall frame, crossed arms, dirt under his nails, a utility belt slung low on his hips like it belonged to someone who had learned to carry his life in tools and snacks and tiny socks. He said nothing more than, "Hey, you okay?" but his voice folded into the small space between them like a blanket. That was Adil. A single father who worked nights fixing building boilers and cranky washing machines so his son, Sammy, could wake to a warm breakfast and the world smelling like pancakes some mornings. He had been coming home late after a 12-hour shift when he saw a woman trying to hurry into the stairwell, her breath sharp as winter. The box man's hand was too close to her, his smile too soft. Adil stepped forward because that was how he kept his little boy safe. By making sure the world's sharp things were kept at arm's length. He did not introduce himself. He did not offer his number. He simply put himself between them, and the man with the stolen smile looked at him and decided Maya was not worth that moment's trouble. The real trouble came 2 nights later. Maya closed her eyes after a late edit and dreamed of paragraphs she hadn't written yet. A window banged, someone downstairs with a ladder, or a cat, she told herself. The second bang came with a speaker of male voices, none of them kind. She opened her door to the dark hallway and before she could register how small the silhouettes were, a gloved hand clamped over her mouth and her bag was dragged from her shoulder. It happened so quickly that she tasted copper in her mouth and heard the wet slap of a footstep close to her head. The van smelled like rubber and something chemical, the man's breath reeked of stale beer. But the world has a way of delivering impossible helpers. Adil, who had been returning Sammy's soccer ball that rolled down her building's alley, heard a cry that did not sound like a typical neighborly dispute. He saw the van, the motion, and something older than courage, the accumulated responsibility of a father who must always be able to come home and say he did everything, flared up. He threw his body at the rear of the van, not thinking about the numbers on his phone, not thinking how tired he was. He only thought of that copper taste that means someone's life could be altered. The struggle was messy and real. Adil bled from a split eyebrow. Maya's wrist was grazed by broken glass. The kidnapper was not some movie villain, he was a frightened man with a plan for money and a chronic hunger for control. But he was not ready for Adil's refusal to let a woman disappear into a cold van. They fought and grunted, Adil's tools became improvised weapons, a heavy wrench swung like a bell, a screwdriver jammed into an eye line of strategy. The van lurched and stalled. Someone called the police. Adil shouted for Maya to run as the door finally gave and she bolted like a deer finding light. She didn't call him a hero for days. Immediately after the incident she dropped into a fog of shock and gratitude that made words seem expensive. She went to the hospital for stitches and would later discover that she had more lost hours than she could account for. Memories came as fragments, a wrench, a child's small hand in the dark, the smell of a father's jacket. Adil visited once with a bag of pastries and a band-aid for his own eyebrow. He asked if she needed a ride home. She said yes. Between the hospital and her recovery, the city's quiet judgment tried its best to be louder than it deserved to be. Reporters wanted a mugshot to fit their headline. The landlord taped new locks and avoided eye contact. Maya, who had been self-reliant since the day she cashed her first paycheck, realized how porous independence could be when an event pried at its seams. Adil's presence was an antidote to that claim that she had to be alone. His visits, at first infrequent, became regular. He brought a thermos of soup that tasted like the childhood she had forgotten she missed. Sammy, curious and solemn, would stand by the corridor and offer cookies with a seriousness that suggested he was brokering peace. There was no instant romance. There was a slow, terrifying tenderness. Maya felt indebted to the man who saved her life, and the shame of owing a debt made her step back. Adil, in turn, did not want accolades for what any decent person should do. He wanted nothing more than for Maya to be safe. Sometimes he would sit on the stoop outside her building and tell Sammy a story about a stubborn rooster that refused to give up its breakfast. The laughter of a small boy was how most of their days found a shape, not in tidy dinners but in the quiet translation of two lives making space. Closes with the small, sharp thing that keeps a viewer perched. The kidnapping had been only the beginning. Because saving someone from an immediate danger does not erase what grows afterwards. Fear, trust, and the fragile architecture of a connection between two people who are learning to be brave in different ways. Maya thought she owed him her silence, Adil thought he owed her safety. The real question drifting in the open spaces between them was more dangerous than any van: could they let someone else help carry their burdens? Recovery unspooled in ways neither of them anticipated. Maya's nightmares lasted nearly a month, brief, hot flashes where the van's interior swallowed entire streets. She learned to name the fear. She also learned to watch the city at different hours and notice the small mercies: a neighbor returning a stray cat, the concierge who hummed while he mopped, the old woman at the corner shop who gave her a packet of dried mango to cheer her up. Adil taught her that help could be ordinary. He brought a small, dented radio and taught Sammy and Maya how to make toast without burning the edges. He fixed her dripping faucet when she didn't know which wrench was which. But life, mercifully and brutally, did not allow trauma a permanent address. Money problems mailed themselves back into their lives. Court dates for the kidnapper required testimony. The police reports were made of formalities and bruises, not apologies. Maya's freelance work lagged because deadlines moved like islands she could not reach. Adil's job grew more demanding in winter. Boilers needed attention, pipes froze, people called at all hours. They both had reasons to walk away. And yet they kept choosing to stay present in the same room with one another. What changed them was not a grand gesture but 1,000 small ones: the way Adil would check the balcony lock twice, the way Maya showed up at Sammy's school play and pretended she knew how the words went, the way she left a sticky note on his apartment door that read, "You fixed my sink. I owe you pancakes." In those small exchanges the debt shifted into something else, possibility. Then, one night, a different danger, the sort that comes from the inside, arrived. Maya received a terse email from the editor of a magazine she had worked with for years. They were going in a different direction. Her contract would not be renewed. Money tightness is a peculiar terror, quiet, steady, inevitable. She swallowed the news like a bitter pill and tried not to show panic when she saw Adil the next morning. She wanted to be the woman who weathered this without drama, but her voice thinned when she admitted the truth: "I'm scared I won't make rent next month." Adil did not offer a lecture. He offered the baker's shift at the small cafe near his building where he worked mornings for cash on the side, and told her to take it. "I can handle Sammy," he said. "You take the mornings. We'll figure the rest." The barter was practical, not cinematic. He was not rescuing her from immediate physical peril this time, he was rescuing her from the suffocating slough of financial panic. She accepted, and the arrangement refused to be a neat repayment for a life saved. It became the moment when they began to rely on each other without counting costs. Months passed and the city, which had once felt so hostile, softened in careful ways. Maya's freelance work returned with new clients who liked the earnestness of her edits. Adil's manager at the heating company offered him a promotion because of the way he handled the emergency at the school boiler one winter night when every parent was teetering between anger and tears. Sammy collected badges for being on time, and Maya made him a comic strip about a boy and a rooster who saved the day. They found rituals, Saturday pancakes, grocery runs where they argued about the right kind of apples, and late-night conversations where they unfolded the maps of their past and told each other what they feared people would never accept. They also faced the judgment of others. Adil's ex. A woman who had left years ago when he could not promise a stable apartment and whose absence hung over him like a glass clearness, returned briefly to collect her things and offered sharp opinions about what it meant for him to be attached again. Maya's mother, who had once advised her to marry up and get comfortable, worried that gratitude could masquerade as love and that dependence might choke ambition. The world offered them plots that would have made for easier endings: keep things practical, keep hearts fragile, keep the lines uncommitted. But their love, because that is the name it wore, even when they refused it, did not repeat such easy scripts. It was forged in escalations, a hospital wait that stretched into the night when Sammy had a fever and Adil's hand never left Maya's shoulder, a letter from Maya's estranged sister that required forgiveness and a conversation at 3 a.m. about what family meant. A cold night when the boiler blew and Adil carried their neighbors' blankets door to door because he knew how quickly cold could become cruel. The turning point came not with fireworks but with a quiet, unplanned revelation. Adil had always been the sort to speak plainly. One spring afternoon, he and Maya sat on a bench watching Sammy race pigeons with a plastic truck. Adil took her hand, thumbed the thin scar on her wrist left from the van, and said, "I didn't do what I did for a story. I did it because I could not imagine Sammy growing up in a world where someone chose fear over action. I can't promise you a life without hard mornings. I can promise you this: I will be there." Maya, who had relearned the textures of safety, looked at him and listened to the way his voice settled like a promise into her bones. She wanted to answer, to give him her whole story, to hand over all the fragile trophies of fear and let him place them on a mantle of trust. And instead of waiting for a ring or the perfect movie moment proposal, she surprised them both. That evening she carried a small, inexpensive ring in her pocket. Not an ostentatious thing but a simple band she had seen months earlier and kept because it felt like the right shape for ordinary hands. She had no right to demand forever after someone had saved her life and then helped her live it. She had no script for how to express the gratitude that had become something closer to affection. So she sat across from Adil in their favorite diner, smiled like a woman making a small, brave trade with herself, and said, "Will you marry me?" The world paused in that tinny diner light for a single beat, the kind of beat that allows someone to choose. Adil, who once thought heroism ended at a wrench and a willingness to get bruised, felt something older than surprise. He had imagined asking her 100 times, fumbling with words or rings, rehearsing apologies for how imperfect his love might be. But here was Maya, not bowing in gratitude, but offering partnership in plain language. Her proposal had no entitlement in it. It had only the clarity of someone who had been given life again and did not want to squander it. He laughed, a wet and relieved sound, then answered with all the unceremonious tenderness of a man who had learned to promise small, steady things. "Yes," he said. Sammy cheered, a high, delighted noise, and the waitress, a woman who knew them both by now, congratulated them like she had been watching the best part of a play. They kissed, awkward and certain, and when they pulled apart they both knew that life would continue to be hard, bills would come, nights would be sleepless, and grief would visit in its own time. But they also knew now they would face it together. The final image, the one that will keep the viewer's throat tight in the last moments, is simple: Adil and Maya walking home under an umbrella, Sammy between them holding their hands, and the city lights reflecting like promises on the wet pavement. The ring shone a little in the rain. There was no fanfare, no grand declaration beyond the small vows people make when they choose someone after the worst and the best of themselves are already known. Maya had returned from darkness not with a debt, but with a proposal, not because she felt obligated, but because she had discovered the rarest courage, to offer her whole life to someone who had already given him his. And so the story ends not with a single rescue but with a becoming, two people who found in each other the quiet scaffolding that holds a life upright. They learned that love, like safety, is made of actions more often than words, of standing between someone and danger, of showing up when the furnace fails, of lending a shift at the cafe, of saying, "I will be there," and then being there. The city went on, indifferent and luminous, and they went on within it, not unbroken, but unafraid to hold one another's scars.